Hello, and this is week 6 of the Machine Quilting Blog Hop. We are blogging our way through each chapter in the book, The Ultimate Guide to Machine Quilting by Angela Walters and Krista Watson. This week is Cornered. In this chapter, there were 2 stitches that I really wanted to practice. One is hooked swirls, and the other, I always want to call it something else, is swirls and pearls. The takeaways from this chapter are both of those are a little more advanced stitches, and they took me a lot of practicing, several hours of practicing to get the basics of it. And I wouldn't say that I am a proficient hook swirled quilter. There's a lot of nuances in the curl, the stop, the hook coming around. And you can see in this top line is my practice on this practice piece for hook swirls. At the bottom is swirls and pearls, and you can see it more in this zone. I'll be doing a close-up of that later on in the post, and you'll be able to see more of how I did it. So what are my takeaways from this chapter besides the usual practice, practice, practice? Well, there were a couple of things as I look in the book, and that are signature styles of both Krista and Angela. Angela talked more about efficient quilting and kind of bouncing around the quilt block in a continuous line. She varied the textures a lot from background to the quilt block. Now, Krista did the same thing, but her signature style is more on textured with all of the quilting stitches, and she also used the continuous curve, or what she called bounce around the triangle. Now remember, I tried that a couple weeks ago and it wasn't really successful. I did the long armor's perspective because on Krista's stitches, I've done a lot of those and I feel pretty comfortable. She did a beautiful free motion flower and waves and textured, which I'll show on a whole cloth quilt that I did last year. But what I found to be very difficult is what Angela does a lot of for efficient quilting is motif quilting. It was hard. It was very hard because it's in her first book, she did connect the dots in the first few books that she's done, where you put dots on and you do certain arcs or swirls to get to each spot. And she did that signature style in this chapter. I'm not very good at it. And I need a lot of practice before I claim to do that well without printing out and tracing an entire motif on a block. It can be done free motion, and it can be done with lots of practice. But we also have to remember there's a time and a place for everything, and that's why this book was so great, because it forced me out of my rut and realizing when I could use some of these motifs, like in borders or corners, how to turn and mirror, but also how to come up with a game plan on quilting each quilt. Are you going to do it block by block? Are you going to do it on the whole with the background receding and the blocks coming forward? That's what I like about this book. It's not a cookbook of how to make a quilt, which they do have lots of patterns in this book. Oh, that was the back. They do have lots of patterns in this book, 10 of them. But the key is you can design your own twist in it with just a few basic changes in colors and how you choose to quilt it. So that's my takeaway for this week. If you missed it, I did interview Krista Watson on my podcast, and she was just a delight to talk to, and she had a lot of wonderful tips. And we are going to have a giveaway toward the end of the blog hop, so be watching for that. This book will be part of it, as well as some other surprises. So please stay tuned and feel free to leave comments below. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, then you'll always be notified when I put up a new video. Thanks again, and everyone quilt on. Stop. I gotta tell myself, stop here and then travel around. Make a little S, come back, and around. I'm gonna do a double hook. S, stop, around. Oh, well, that went over. Okay, so what I want to show you is hooked feathers. You can see that you have to do a meandering style, so I came around, I made a curl, I stopped, you make a little S, you come down, you stop here, you come around, and I did a double hook action. I came up, I stopped, came around, and then I made another hook, the S, down, and around. So I bounced around doing all types of these hooked swirls. This one turned out really good. See how that hook came around really nicely? And I remembered to come here and stop and change direction. My problem was I wanted to come around, stop, and then swirl again. And you can see that I forgot to stop here, but I did a good one here. So around, make a little S, stop, swirl, echoing, get you to where you want to go. Now here are my swirls and pearls. I think I did a lot of these over the last year, and I got some great tips from Krista on my podcast. So you come around, and I like to make that a apostrophe style S. You come around and you try not to retrace every pebble. See how I did that on every single one of these? I retrace them all. What you want to do is more like in this series of pebbles, where you come around and you make your swirl. And then what I did was you do a O, and then you twirl around to make an E. That one you traced a lot. This one, very little backtracking, O's and E's, or figure eights. And then I came around, and then that was the traveling pattern. Now you can see I got a lot of pearls in here. Really makes a nice texture. Look how squishy that is. So, swirls and pearls. My hooked feathers aren't exactly like Angela's, but this one, I like that. I'm going to keep practicing that. Everyone have a great week. This is week 6 in the Machine Quilting Blog Hop, and the chapter is called Cornered. It's about efficient continuous line quilting and not breaking your thread very often. So I want to show you, I started this whole block here, and then I did some long loops, and these loops were really my attempt at making the poinsettia or fan-shaped type of quilting that Angela did. I want to show you what I did when I got here. I worked it backwards. So I started here, and I worked my loops actually to the left, to the left, to the left, to the left. And then I wound up snaking up here and doing just a really loose switchback, and then I echoed it, and at the bend I crossed the bend to give it a ribbon effect, and then I did the same motif here, and then I came down after all of that, and this is where I have trouble making motifs because the area is kind of small. But I arced around each, and then I made this arc, robbing Peter to pay Paul, or orange peels. And then I hated the center because they didn't meet, so I did break my thread and cheated. And then I made a circle, broke my thread, and started again. So overall, the block is nice and textured. It has a motif, and it really did limit the number of thread breaks. I'm coming over to just swirls. This chapter had a lot of swirls and pearls and hooked swirls. So this was a practice in swirls. And then I want to show you my hooked swirl small scale. I have another video that'll be attached that's a long scale. I outlined part of this block to try to keep it tacked down. Did Greek keys around. Let me come back a little bit and show you. Part of cornered is having different stitches in every corner or round. And you can see in this one I used Krista's circle and swerve. And I did it all the way around, and then I echoed it. There's a theme here, echoing. And when I did, I came around and under, and I crossed again at the arch to make it look more ribbon-like. I did L's, and then I went L's and E's. And here is a basic shape that's in the motif of a lot of quilts. Just an echoing line. I got to the corner. Hey, let's do something completely different. How did I do these hook swirls? Well, these are a little bit better than the ones that I'll show you earlier, but you do, this is where I started. You come around, and then I came back, and then at the apex you make a hook, come back down, and there it is again. Now this one I got carried away and made a loop, and then I did it again. So this is a lot about traveling and echoing to get the look you want. Now I want to show you the swirls and pearls. Well, look at swirls and pearls. I did it a couple different ways. Here's a swirl with the squiggle, and when I came back around I did pearls around my swirl. Pearls are fun because then you can do like a paisley or teardrop. I echoed it large and filled it in with pearls. Pearls I used a lot in this row. And here I made a big swirly thing and was practice filling it in. Now remember, pebbling. Krista told us you go around like a O, and then this one is a E. And you only backtrack enough to make your next circle around. Swirls and pearls. I'm looking for down in this area here. There's really more of the swirls and pearls that Krista did in the book. Coming around, filling in it with some pearls, and then making more swirls, and then filling it in with pearls. The other thing Angela did in this chapter was echoing some of these lines in almost a leaf fashion, and it really gives a lot of great texture. Decided to put a little swirl and curl in there and worked my way up. So there you have Cornered, week 6 of the Machine Quilting Blog Hop. And in here I did a practice piece just collaging in all of the different shapes, and we'll be talking about this a little bit more as we get into the next couple of weeks. Thanks for joining us.